our session today, we're going to explore how 2 music education hubs responded to the challenges presented by COVID-19 and how their learning is going to inform their future work. We'll hear from Wiltshire Music Connect about their programme of in-depth action research with young people, families and music leaders and teachers about their experiences of learning music over lockdown. They will share their findings and how they've shaped the CPD and programmes of work and support that they offer. We're also going to have a case study from Hertfordshire Music Education Hub, focusing on one-to-one songwriting workshops for young people with social challenges, and a discussion of how online working offers ways to support inclusion in music education. These will be followed by the Q&A. So just to give you an outline in terms of times, I'm passing over to Wiltshire Music Hub shortly, and then at about 1:15 we'll pass over to Hertfordshire, and then at approximately 1:45 we'll move on to the Q&A. So now I'd like to hand over to Nick and Sophie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here this afternoon. My name's Nick Howdle. I'm the leader of Wiltshire Music Connect, and I'm here with my colleague Sophie Amstel, who is waving at you, I think. She's our development manager for schools and curriculum. As Sarah said, we're going to talk about a piece of action research work that was carried out nearly a year ago during the first bout of lockdown. Research about what we were all learning at a particular and an extraordinary moment in time. As a music education hub, our lockdown lessons are mainly ones about how we feel that we should work and how we should support others to adapt, and also to seize opportunity. We're going to give you a bit of background to our organisation, explain the research study and some of the findings, although you'll be able to access more of the detail online after the fact. But what we actually thought would be one of the most interesting things to do today would be to share with you some of the things that we then did with what we've learned and how that's informed, as Sarah said, the decisions that we've made in the latter part of the last year and indeed will be making into the future. The piece of work and indeed the ways that we've responded to it have been supported with a mixture of our hub funding and also a grant from NIMAS's Connect Resound, which has been great, very much appreciated. And of course, it's great also to be in a situation where we can then share some of that stuff back with you today. It's probably sensible also for me to point out that our particular hub model, which is different to many and which Sophie is going to outline in a second, is very much concerned with supporting an ecology and an economy and a way of working in Wiltshire that is also about enabling ownership and the taking of responsibility for different areas of different work by different stakeholders. We're not a kind of a top-down telling people what to do kind of outfit. We don't really want to be, and we're not in a position to do that. What we want is for people to own their areas of work and to make decisions that are based on good grounding information and intelligence about those decisions. And we see our role as a hub in part to be about supporting them with that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So for those of you that don't know Wiltshire, it's probably useful for you to know that it's a fairly sprawling rural county with 238 schools, and 25% of our primary schools are designated as being small schools. So that means they have fewer than 115 pupils. So that gives you a bit of a sense of what the landscape is like for us. We have a very small staff team. We only have 5 employed members of staff with the equivalent of about 4 full-time. And we all work strategically and developmentally. We do have a pool of contractors who cover specific tasks for us, like social media, design and evaluation. We have 14 music clusters, and each of those clusters has a freelance coordinator working for us on a very part-time basis. We're part of the local authority, so part of Wiltshire Council's Education and Skills Directorate, but we're very arm's length. In fact, Wiltshire Council, although it's the accountable body for Arts Council, has delegated decisions to a stakeholder board. And we also have a CIC that supports our work, and it enables us to do the kind of fundraising that's usually a bit difficult if you're part of a local authority. So we find that very helpful. And what might be most interesting to you is that we don't employ or hire any tutors at all to deliver for our hub. And Nick is going to explain a little bit more about that.
So instead, we have a pool of freelance independent associates. They are individuals, organisations and groups of individuals and organisations. Anyone can apply to be an associate, and the application process is stringent. That's really important. Not everyone who applies gets through. And so it carries some status and is, we feel, respected and valued. Associates get a public profile in an online directory that schools, parents or young people can search, knowing that anyone on the list and on the screen in front of them has met certain thresholds in terms of safeguarding professionalism and the quality of their work. And we encourage schools and parents to recognise variety and to make informed choices about the kind of provider that will be right for them and their particular set of circumstances. Those who are our associates can access CPD that we provide, grants that we give, subsidies for pupils who would not otherwise be able to learn, and also the Hub's instrument hire scheme. And in return, we require our associates to submit an annual data return. Increasingly, that gives us a much fuller picture of what's really going on in Wiltshire than we would if we were just using a single delivery model. We now have over 150 different associates, and more keep appearing, which we feel is really a really healthy state of affairs.
So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what our organisation is like and our background. What I want to do now is try and explain what that meant for us when the first lockdown appeared. So what happened back in March last year when that very first lockdown was announced. I'm aware that, of course, a lot of hubs were really facing difficult financial problems at that moment in time because they were facing a loss of income. For us, that wasn't the case because we don't do any direct delivery, we don't have employed tutors, so we don't bill parents. And that in turn meant that we had no need to furlough any staff. So our income, it's fair to say, wasn't immediately affected. We moved our cluster activity and our CPD online, and we were lucky in that as a team, we were already using Zoom. So it wasn't a new thing for us. We didn't have to learn the new skills associated with Zoom. But there were other problems and challenges. So we had partners who suddenly found themselves unable to deliver on commissions and grants that we had given them. So we were in the position of having to agree extensions to timelines. We had some organisations and individuals who wanted to return money to us because they couldn't deliver on what we'd contracted them to. And on the flip side, some who wanted upfront fees or percentages of their grants for activity that was being delayed, because if they didn't get those fees up front, they couldn't stay solvent. We also had a lot of associates who were facing a loss of income. And although we don't employ our associates, we do feel a significant level of responsibility towards them. And of course, if we lose associates, then the music education ecology in Wiltshire suffers. So we were trying to be as supportive as possible to our pool of associates, signposting them to government support schemes where possible, and encouraging schools to honour payments to them and things like that. And I think the final significant challenge we were facing at that time was schools demanding information from us. And I'm sure this was the case for most hubs. Schools desperate to know what is and what isn't allowed. Can you provide risk assessments? All of those kinds of things. So that was the sort of context and the situation we found ourselves in.
So amidst the chaos and the rather fraught excitement of the first lockdown, I think we all realised it was going to be an extraordinary moment in our, and indeed in children and young people's lives, and that we must make sure that we captured that moment for how things were in Wiltshire, And also, I think we sensed that there would be gems as well as awfulness. What Are We Learning was a research project devised by Nell Farrelly, who I think is here in the audience today, along with our team, to capture some of what the music education community in Wiltshire were learning and how practice was changing in response to the pandemic. And of course, at that time, everything was changing very, very quickly. We wanted to make sure that we got the views of children and young people and their families with whom we as a small hub team don't normally have a direct relationship. We wanted to know what they thought of not only online tuition, but their music education generally, because they would, in some cases, possibly for the first time, actually have comparisons to make.
So we had to make some decisions about how we were going to find out what we wanted to know. We knew that we wanted to cover both the breadth and the depth of people's perspectives, and we also wanted to involve some of our associate tutors. So we went with the idea of inviting 8 of our associates to take on the role of co-researcher. And we looked for people in our associate pool who could provide us with a bit of a range in terms of the instruments that they taught, the styles of music, the geographical location, and in particular, their level of experience of using technology in their teaching. And we were really pleased that everyone we invited to be a co-researcher said yes to the role. So that co-researcher role involved 2 main tasks. The first one was writing a reflective case study about their own experiences. And then the second one was carrying out short audio recorded interviews with 4 of their existing pupils who they were in contact with because they were giving them online tuition. We supported the co-researchers in their role by making sure that they all took part in an online briefing and training session, which involved things like interview techniques, ethical considerations when you're interviewing children, data management, those kinds of things. We also had another method of data collection, which was an online questionnaire, and that was for children and young people and also for their parents and carers. And overall, we were really pleased with the level of response that we got and the amount of information that that provided us with. So you can see from this slide, we ended up with 32 interviews with students who were having online lessons, 53 questionnaire responses from children and young people, 234 responses from parents and carers, plus the 8 written reflective case studies from our co-researchers. So Nell then did the difficult job of pulling together all of the data and analysing it, and she has produced for us 3 different documents to share what we've learned. One of them is a headlines document, which is mainly a visual summary. Then there is a 6-page document which describes in a bit more detail the key points. And then there is the full report, which addresses all of the research questions. And Nick has just pasted a link to our website into the chat where you can download all of those documents. Now, in terms of today, as you can imagine, there's a wealth of information that we gathered from this process, and we can't possibly describe everything that came out of the research that was interesting, but we wanted to talk about just a couple of the key themes that ended up in those reports. So if I could have the next slide, Nick. So going to talk briefly about the findings, and I think it's important to say at this moment that some of the research findings might now seem fairly obvious, but a year ago when we carried this out, this stuff was all really new. We were talking about the firsts of everything, the first time we'd done this, and we really needed to gather this information so that we could decide how best to invest our time and resources. So the findings are split into 3 key themes, and this first one is about children and young people. Generally, children and young people felt that online tuition was a good alternative in the circumstances of lockdown, but second best compared to face-to-face lessons. They mentioned factors like being motivated to practice when they had an online lesson to look forward to. Most of them wanted a return to face-to-face lessons, but a significant proportion said that they would like a mix of both face-to-face and online going forward. So that for us is a really interesting outcome from this research. They generally adapted well to the technology. I've said already we're in a very rural county, and slow internet speeds are something that we're very used to in Wiltshire, and I think that was frustrating for some of our young people. We asked them lots of questions about progression, and some interesting things came out of that. Having more time at home during lockdown really helped them in terms of finding space and time to practice. They didn't have so many other activities in their lives that were competing for their time. We didn't specifically ask them about their well-being, but it did come up a lot. So there were some students who commented that having direct contact with their tutor through an online lesson was really valued, as was the routine that those lessons provided them with. And parents noted that their child having contact with an adult outside of the family was really beneficial for well-being. Not everyone found online lessons positive. Some parents felt that their children found it really difficult to focus when the communication was all going through a screen. And the responses of students with special educational needs and disabilities was really mixed. We had questionnaire responses from parents who felt that their child's special educational needs meant that online lessons really were just not right for them. And we did speak to some families who refused online lessons. The reasons were really varied, but it was often based on lack of technology at home, perhaps children sharing devices, and in some cases just not having a printer to print out sheet music.
Moving on to the second theme, tutors or associates. Although none of the 8 co-researchers had been offering online tuition before March of last year, many said that they would like to keep it as part of their offer in the longer term and in certain circumstances, perhaps for a catch-up lesson, perhaps for extra lessons in the run-up to exams, or online lessons during the longer school holidays, ways to maintain students' progression, and of course also from an associate's point of view, ways to earn money from doing that work. Their teaching had to be innovative and creative to respond to some of the demands of onlineness, and it certainly seemed that tutors were consciously considering every aspect of the way that they taught to ensure that it would work as well as possible in a virtual environment. Particular things that people said that they would like to continue in the future were around the greater use of technology in their teaching, speed manipulation apps, digital tuners, setting timers to get students to focus on practicing more intensely and for a specified amount of time, but also getting students to video themselves playing as a way of encouraging self-critique and criticism. One interesting and perhaps unexpected outcome of online, and one which we've heard in other forums as well, was that tutors felt that they had perhaps previously underestimated students' capacity to manage aspects of their own learning. When students weren't in the same room as their tutor, they have to trigger the backing tracks, they have to plug themselves into amps, they have to mark up their scores and their notes. And encouraging this independence was something that many people were keen to see continue.
So the final theme is around parents and carers. First of all, parents were really appreciative that tutors moved to offer online tuition so quickly, and many of them reported that they really enjoyed being more involved in their children's learning. And there were some other advantages that parents appreciated as well. For example, their child might be less likely to forget to go to their lesson and then miss it. They also appreciated not having to drive their child to school on cello lesson day, or not having to hang around sitting in a car whilst a lesson was taking place. And those things might initially seem quite silly, but actually they're significant and are often factors in children giving up. So this is useful information to have. Some of the comments in the parent and carer questionnaire responses suggested that parents were actually a bit miffed when their child's tutor didn't offer online tuition. And generally, I think it's fair to say that parental expectations have been raised by their experiences over lockdown.
So what have we done with all of this? There's no point in investing time and money into research and an exploration like this if you don't do anything with it. So how's it informed what we've done, and how will it continue to inform our work? We've broken this down under 3 headings. The first being about communications and engagement. Clearly, music was and still is at risk in terms of both opportunities for children and young people, and also about the stability of the economy and the ecology to which I referred to at the beginning. In our case in Wiltshire, we reckon that's worth somewhere between £3 and £4 million a year. We came up with the idea of a campaign called Don't Drop Music, a campaign with which our stakeholders could engage in their own ways, but which collectively aligned and made sense. And it includes resources which we've recently updated, facing parents, resources facing tutors, resources facing towards schools, and also an advocacy film. And you can see the link to that in the chat. The campaign also included a number of carefully positioned communications for Wiltshire's members of Parliament, with whom we really hadn't had very much communication before. On one hand, the letters were encouraging to push ministers to make sure that music education remained on the agenda and to recognise the economic impact for up to 100 small businesses, as well as the educational issues. On the other hand, we also wanted to make sure that we shared with members of Parliament some of the innovation and good news stories about music that our stakeholders were increasingly beginning to share with us. And we're going to be continuing our communications with members of Parliament moving forward. We, along with others in the country, feel quite sure that continued advocacy for music and music education with politicians is going to be really important. Another thing that we did was that we began to relabel our regular communications with associates and schools in order to make sure that the crucial information would reach them and that it would be read. So this may have been about changes to funding or funding opportunities, government guidance, and particularly that information about what or wasn't appropriate or allowed at the time, and also things to do with safeguarding, particularly in relation to online work. And to counterbalance that, we also minimized the amount of more general information that we put out in order to try and keep these channels clearer and clean. The exception to this, as it was with the MP's letters, was beginning to share good news stories and, if you like, showing lights at the end of the tunnel, and particularly making sure that people could see examples of how others and their peers were getting around some of the issues and challenges that they all faced. Because of the ways that things had changed and the things that Sophie listed earlier, we began to see increased levels of engagement from our associates and from schools in terms of readership of the information that we put out, and also in terms of attendance at online networking and CPD events. And I think it would probably be fair to say now, a year later, that that more associates and more schools appreciate and understand the range of the different things that we do, often in the background, to support their work. In turn, this has meant that we've been able to bring forward some plans that we already had about developing greater stakeholder influence in our decision making and governance. We've done that by developing expert groups. After 6 months of the pandemic, we decided that we would put out a call for people to express interest in joining expert groups rather than waiting. We were thrilled to have more than 30 people responding and putting their names into various hats. Those groups are now active, and by the end of this term, they will all have met and all have made decisions that influence the way that we go forward. And looking back on it now, digital in one form or another made all of those things possible. All of those things in that list that I've just gone through, it made them possible and it made them accessible.
So we also used the research to inform our programme of CPD and networking events. So we recognised that well-being was becoming a significant issue. So we responded by providing weekly and then fortnightly coffee mornings on Zoom for absolutely anyone in our associate community who wanted to turn up. And they could either discuss particular issues or just hang out with each other, actually, if that's what they wanted to do. We deliberately didn't set the agenda, we just provided the virtual space for those sessions. And then in response to some of the things that became apparent in those coffee mornings, we programmed a series of mental health awareness training sessions, which are ongoing and which we expect to continue for the foreseeable future. Last summer, we ran 2 sessions led by Nigel Taylor, where we began to explore the process of preparing for a different normal. So we were encouraging our associates to think about more than just getting back to how things had been before. And we also encouraged associates who had been finding solutions to particular things to share their learning with their peers through CPD. So, you know, we're happy to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, but what we can do is spotlight people in our stakeholder groups who have found some of the answers. So examples of those peer-led CPD sessions would be one of our associates who ran a training session on doing first access online, someone else who ran a session on putting together ensemble recordings, and someone who ran a session on how you deliver group work on Zoom. The research has also informed the way that we use our resources and the way we distribute our funding. Could I have the next slide, please, Nick? So we usually have a development fund that associates can access, but we repurposed this fund so that it became an associate support fund, offering small grants to our associates to help them meet the needs of adapting their offer to the changing environment. And similarly, we opened a school recovery fund, and that has supported 40 schools in the last year with small grants to enable them to adapt and reopen musical activity. And in turn, they're often employing associates to do that. So it is helping the overall ecology and the music education economy. We recognised fairly quickly the impact that the pandemic was having on new pupil recruitment and the knock-on effect that that has for associates' income. So we've been working with one of our new expert groups to devise a call to action for associates and schools to better showcase opportunities for musical learning to pupils. And to bolster that, we commissioned a set of video making resources that enable associates to make and share their own short promotional videos with schools and prospective customers. So in doing so, we've created a model that can actually just become part of the annual cycle now, so that we're all used to being seen on video. We made some tablets available to children and young people who don't have the technology in their own homes to access online lessons. So that again is the direct response to something that came up in the research. And we've started inviting our associates, some of the ones who were involved in the original What Are We Learning research, to blog about aspects of their work. And I think Nick will put the link to the blog in the chat in a moment so you can see the kind of things that they choose to talk about. And finally, we made the decision to press ahead with the Wiltshire Music Education Awards last year, and we will be doing so again this year, because we recognise that it's really important to give all of those people who are nominated the respect and profile that they're due, and it has the added benefit of raising the profile of music generally.
So why was this so important to us and our ways of working? It's been really interesting to reflect on this in the course of putting this presentation together. And as I said earlier, our hub model is very much concerned with enabling ownership of and taking responsibility for different areas of work by different stakeholders. And I think that we've recognised for some time that projecting a consistent and positive mindset, if you like, would be one of the things that would really make young people's music in Wiltshire stronger, more sustainable, and ultimately more secure for the long term. From my point of view, that's a long game. It's strategic, and it means winning the hearts and minds of different stakeholder groups in different ways over time, not a couple of years here and there, 5, 10 years. Within that, being able to try different things and to chop and change and amend strategies and plans was really important in order to get things right. Looking back at the previous 3 slides, I hope that you'll be able to see how we as an example were on one hand able to use positive and productive communication to feed that process and that sense of involvement and to engender sustained engagement which will carry forward into the future. that we've seen CPD and networking opportunities prove that they can not only support stakeholders in finding their way through things, but indeed enable those stakeholders to see how others are interpreting and responding to things and to lead themselves forward. Now more than ever, we know that we work in an environment of constant change and evolution, and that being flexible about where cash, staff time and skills could be directed has been really, really important. I would say without any doubt whatsoever that crisis presents opportunity. The pandemic has produced good and valuable things as well as horror and turmoil. And digital, which of course is what a lot of this festival this week is about, is a great example of that. For us, the pandemic and what are we learning have enabled us to do things that we had in our sights anyway, but sooner and perhaps differently than we might. It's legitimized them, it's tested them, and it will have made them and the work that we do as a consequence of that better. We're really keen to make sure that we learn from all of this. Was everything in the old normal great? No, of course it wasn't. So I would say, which are the bits that we need to get back to, and which are the bits that we need to push on and embrace and change so that they become embedded in a new and a better normal? We all, I think, at this particular moment in time, have windows of opportunity to jump through. The windows that may never have opened otherwise, and that we can use to benefit children and young people. Some of you may be working on the direct delivery of activities for children and young people. Some may be managers of projects or initiatives, leaders in waiting, or perhaps new in post, eager to make changes that predecessors couldn't or wouldn't or hadn't. Now could well be the time to do that. It's an almost once in a lifetime chance. Certainly in Wiltshire, and before the pandemic, we'd begun to identify some of the themes and opportunities that we knew that we wanted to expand on in the coming years, and digital was really high on that list. We felt that we'd made insufficient progress with that, and of course it's been accelerated hugely in a very short period of time. We don't want to present ourselves as being know-it-all specialists in that field, but we are keen to see that the ground that's been gained over the last year, the momentum that's been gathered, is maintained, and crucially that it's matured and woven into a revised and sustainable future-facing offer, that new and better normal. Working with a guy called Ben Sellers, who some of you will have come across before, we're going to be curating a series of events which we hope will progress and mature that agenda. And whilst primarily for the benefit of Wiltshire, the events will be of relevance and interest to others from further afield, and of course will benefit from others' involvement. And we'll be making sure that a number of places at each of those events are available to people from other parts of the country. And we're also talking excitedly, I think, with a number of organisations and looking at the possibility of building a wider alliance of sorts, I guess, around digital in music education. Anyway, we're going to stop now. I hope that's been useful for you and reasonably clear. We'll take Q&As in a bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much, Sophie. That was so fascinating. We've got questions in the Q&A coming through already, but we'll come back to those later. I would like to encourage those of you that do have questions to mind now, pop them into the Q&A and we will come back to them later on. One of the things that really stuck with me there was you saying crisis presents opportunity, and I think one of the main things that we've all learned in this last year, I think, is that we can adapt, and you illustrated that so well. It was clear that you dealt with the fallout of the pandemic with a really positive but also a pragmatic approach. So lots for us to digest there. I'd like to suggest if we have a 5-minute comfort break, because we're actually a little ahead of time, and we come back at 10 past 1, and then we continue with EJ's presentation, which will take us through to 1:45 when we'll begin a Q&A. So just a 4 minutes, actually, 4-minute comfort break. We'll see you all shortly. I'm really looking forward to this next section. We are welcoming EJ from Hertfordshire Music Education Hub. EJ is going to present a case study of some one-to-one songwriting workshops that she has been doing with young people with social challenges, and she's going to be considering inclusion in a digital context. So welcome, EJ.
Hi, thank you. Hello everyone. I'll just share my screen. Great. Can everyone see that? That's okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Thanks. So I'll just describe myself as well. I'm a mixed race woman. I have a teal kind of top on, some jewelry, and dark brown afro hair. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about a case study of an online one-to-one songwriting lessons I have with a student. I'm going to call her Ella for this case study, and that's not her real name. And yeah, so just a little bit about me. I'm a music tutor and workshop leader, and also project officer for Changing Tracks, which is a programme helping music services who want to improve their quality, diversity and inclusion. But yeah, for this I'm going to focus on my music tutor and workshop leader work. So I actually started as a participant in the music service. I went to songwriter workshops and then performed at the Hertfordshire Schools Gala in 2012 at the Royal Albert Hall. And around that same time I was part of UK Youth Parliament, so I have a background in youth work as a participant, but also now with delivery from doing partnership projects with Youth Connections and Hertfordshire Music Service and youth clubs. And everything. And then I've also worked in some pupil referral units and done kind of music-based mentoring and informal music teaching, where it's more about the social and personal outcomes rather than the musical outcomes. And I've also led songwriter workshops and do first access ukulele. And a key thing for me is that my lessons are kind of child-led and child-centered, and that will come through in this case study. And I guess that's also partly informed from my youth work as a participant as well. So yeah, Ella was referred to us from her mum, who contacted a music centre head in Hertfordshire, and her mum said that she'd been having some social mental health challenges, and that she was struggling with lockdown and that songwriting would really help her. So we set this up on Microsoft Teams, and Ella hadn't been a participant in any music service activity before, so this was her first kind of introduction into a music service activity, and basically because it came out of lockdown. So the first time I met Ella, I explained my musical background, what I play, the kind of music I write, and how I teach songwriting and music making in different ways and settings. And I always like to kind of give an introduction into myself, just kind of make it a bit more personal, put us on more of an equal playing field. Sometimes I might sing a song as well to show that. And yeah, I asked what kind of music Ella listens to and what her main interests are and what she wanted to focus on in these lessons. She didn't have all the answers in the first lesson, so it was kind of a gradual discovery and gradual sharing of what she's into, and listening to different music and analysing different songs. And I think it's important to get a rough idea of what the young person's musical interests are before starting these lessons, or at least as you go, so that you can tailor the sessions to really fit them, so they feel really personal and they feel like they're their lessons rather than lessons they're attending that feel quite disconnected from what their own musical goals and wants are. And this is something that is quite important to me, because I remember feeling that when I was younger, and I started learning piano, but I did grades and they didn't really connect with me, the pieces, because I was always interested in songwriting, and yeah, just learning grades didn't quite connect with me, even though I wanted to play piano. And it's only later that I picked up the ukulele and then the guitar, and got involved with the songwriter workshops at Hertfordshire Music Service, that I then started finding my musical voice and being able to write in the way that I wanted to. So this is the first song that she wrote, actually. And yeah, it's called I Miss How It Was. So in this, actually, it will be me singing, because the way we did these sessions was that when I sang and played, I would turn her volume down to avoid the issues of lag and latency. Otherwise, it's just very distracting because you're singing and you can hear that person singing but at a different time. But she could hear me just as normal.
3, 4. Turquoise waves and golden sand, the grain smother and comfort my hand. Dolphins sing and dance in a way, the purple sky shines and whispers my name. Memories scatter my hopeless brain. I'm sitting here dreaming I'll never be the same. I miss how it was back then. I miss the fun of being 10. I miss how it was back then. I miss the fun.
So I'll pause there because I actually messed up the next line, but it was I miss back in the day when you were my friend, I think. So yeah, this is the first song that she wrote, and you can hear in the lyrics maybe that she was kind of channeling those feelings of missing how it was back then, well, back when she was 10, but it was also about kind of lockdown and looking back on, you know, how different life was before the pandemic, but not wanting to directly mention the word lockdown or to talk about, you know, coronavirus or anything. And this is kind of a key theme throughout our lessons, how sometimes she would be talking about something that was maybe happening in her life or something she had felt, but it would be channeled into the story of the song and not have to be completely connected. And so sometimes that can be easier for young people because they don't feel like they're really exposing themselves, or they're not being as vulnerable, but they're still able to express themselves and their thoughts and feelings.
3.
Okay, so yeah, Ella knew a few chords on the ukulele already, so we talked about different chord progressions and using her already existing knowledge, but we soon noticed that this was quite time consuming and left a lot less time for the songwriting. So a couple of weeks into our sessions, she expressed more of an interest in songwriting and playing an instrument and learning chords, especially whilst online. So I would play the instrument and she would sing and focus on the writing. But also knowing that that doesn't have to be completely fixed, because yeah, I have a few different instruments here, and each week we would kind of talk about which instrument she was feeling most cool towards. So I think, yeah, having that flexibility online can be really good, and you can have that in person, obviously, if you're in a music centre, but I think online it's also important to have that so that it doesn't feel completely rigid. So yeah, we changed to me playing the guitar as an accompaniment, and that gave Ella more time to sing. And so in this song, you can kind of hear her lyrics are starting to kind of mature a little bit more, and she's really kind of, yeah, telling a story, and her imagery was already really strong from the beginning, but I think it was a bit more, just a bit more of a young way of writing, and it's definitely kind of, yeah, definitely matured as the weeks have gone by.
3, 4. I was thinking about the day when you got the first train all the way to my place. I wanted you to stay all night. I was thinking about the time when we had our first fight. I was crying all night. You were lying in my arms. We always said it would work. Even now, after all the hurt, I would still take you back again. After all, you're my best
So you can kind of, well, I don't know if you can hear, but you can hear her voice a little bit coming in and out, and that's because obviously it's delayed and I've had her volume turned down. And yeah, one of, as I said, in terms of talking about the emotions and thoughts indirectly, when she would be talking about this, it would be like they could be saying this or they're saying that, rather than I. And sometimes, again, that can really help bring out those ideas without it feeling so super personal and scary that you're sharing it.
3, 4.
I was thinking. Okay. So agency is really important, of course, and kind of having this as a key theme throughout, and know, and for the young person to know that as well, so that it really feels like their lessons and like they have a choice in what they learn. And I've really found that this increases engagement, and it's definitely did increase engagement when I was learning instruments when I was younger, and also when I was songwriting. So as I said, I always ask Ella what she wants to write about and only guide or make suggestions. And there's definitely a balance to strike when it comes to this, as you don't want to kind of leave the young person alone if they're not confident in sharing ideas yet, but you don't want to completely overpower or share too much and then they feel like they're not having the space to kind of have their own voice. So ask questions like, what are you trying to say in this line? How would you feel if you were this character? And what do you want to tell the audience? And this kind of encourages that thought around the story of the song or the lyrics that they have, and can help them also think outside the box or go completely into that character or their own emotional internal world. And also just kind of giving time and space to come up with these ideas, because obviously sometimes you have the kind of time pressure of that lesson if it's only 20 minutes or half an hour, but especially with songwriting, it can be really limiting if you feel that time pressure in a lesson, and can make your creativity feel quite restricted. So it's important that the young person has time to think about their lyrics, and this is really easy to do online, so you can kind of mute your mic, you can turn the camera off, so that they have that privacy to, you know, feel like they can mess up, or not even mess up, just be creative and make up random melodies without feeling like they're wrong. So this is Ella sharing a vocal melody that she came up with. Yeah, I'll play it first.
Cool. Singing now,
So I'll just explain actually. So that was the end of the chorus that we had just sang together, and then she just had an idea whilst singing it, which was one of the first moments that had happened, because before it would be me asking, oh, could you think about where it could go next? So I was really pleased that she felt confident to do that.
got a tune for the chorus that's come into my head. Oh, amazing. I'm recording, so go ahead. Okay. The fires of my day-to-day transform into a stream. The only place you love me back is deep within my dreams. Nice. So kind of very like... Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of the way that melody is like, it's like you're really telling someone that.
Yeah, so I was trying to say that it's really kind of emphasizing, it's like you're trying to share how important that message is. It's like kind of like you're shouting at someone, but through melody. So I thought that was really cool. Okay. So in terms of creating melodies, Ella did start off a little less confident compared to sharing lyrics and singing. But over the weeks, she became more able to share her ideas and create them without much direction from me, as you just saw. And in terms of how we would create that, those melodies, or I would let that happen, is I would play the chords a few times round, giving her time to listen and then share what she has come up with. Or sometimes I would come up with half of the melody for the first half of the line and then ask her to finish it. And yeah, also just talking about singing and different types of melodies and different sections of a song, and asking questions like, how does this make you feel? And does the melody reflect the meaning of the lyrics? And is this a good melody for the chorus, or would it work better somewhere else? And I think, yeah, these kind of questions you can ask in a group setting or face-to-face, but it's much more, you can really get into the detail one-to-one. And yeah, I think that's one of the benefits of doing one-to-one songwriting, because yeah, it's just more personal, and that young person can feel really seen and heard, whereas in a group, obviously there's more people to make your way around. Okay, so this is a melody Ella created after listening to me play the chord sequence a few times. Yes. Okay, when you're ready. Well, I'll give you the note.
Dancing with you on the only cloud in the sky. The stars create a spotlight, and it feels like paradise. The fairies are singing to us, we stop to look around. You tell me you love me, and I hear no other sound. I don't have the chorus, it's just that bit.
So then I tried to put it to the chords. The lyrics is on the only cloud in the sky. Stars create a spotlight, and it feels like paradise. The fairies singing to. So I think over time, when someone creates a melody without even having, you know, the instrument in front of them, and then they see it transform with the instrument, it gives you that confidence, because you know that you can even do it without. And yeah, over time, doing it over and over again, you can see that they become more confident in sharing and not feeling afraid if it's going to be perfect or not. Okay. So one of the things we've done is writing to a brief, and so I asked Ella if she wanted to write to about a certain film or character in a film. So she chose Pulp Fiction, which I hadn't actually seen before, and she chose the character of Mrs. Wallace, and delved into her backstory and started trying to think about the character as like their own person outside of the film, and what they would be thinking, and yeah, that there's so much more than what we see in a 2-hour film or whatever. So yeah, she created her own narrative and kind of also included some of her own feelings and thoughts into this, or you could kind of sense that maybe there was some experience with some of the themes within the film, but that she could now express and think about and write into this song, but without having to tell me that at all. Yeah, so we had Mrs. Wallace, as mysterious as she can be, Mrs. Wallace, no one dances quite like she. Her seductive eyes have grown men falling at her feet. Her power runs so deep, Mother Nature can't compete. Yeah, I thought that was quite powerful. Okay. So as you've heard, I've been kind of recording parts of the lesson and the different ideas and kind of finished ideas as well. And this can help track progress over time and show the young person how far they've come. And at the beginning of lessons, we'll also listen to the previous week's recording and kind of go from there, because sometimes you just need to refresh your memory, or you might hear something that doesn't quite sit right anymore. And occasionally she will have written a few more lines or will suggest new ideas for the next session. And we use the chat function in Microsoft Teams to share lyrics. And then also sometimes I can share the screen if I've got it on a Google Doc or Microsoft Word. And we do that same thing with YouTube videos as well. So sometimes we'll look at singing exercises that she can then do from home. And again, that's really easy thing about working online. You can just quickly hop on to the browser and show something, and it's something that she can do herself as well. And yeah, just put a note here about it's important to work on the vocals as well as the songwriting, as the two go hand in hand for a singer-songwriter. And that's obviously something she wants to, she's aspiring to be. And again, online, you can kind of you can kind of get so much done within a short period of time because of this, and because, you know, she has access to her own device, like she's literally on a device. She's got her songwriter book, she's got her ukulele in the corner. So there's a lot of flexibility for lessons, I think. Like, it can kind of go anywhere. You're not maybe as restricted by just what you've got in a music room or whatever room you're in for that lesson. And she is actually going to university this September to study songwriting. So this has been giving her a really good basis for her studies, and I can see that her confidence has improved in songwriting, but also just with, you know, chatting to me and sharing ideas. Oh, I also wanted to say that these lessons are really doable for different kinds of tutors. So, for example, if a tutor lives in one side of the county and then the student that they would want to teach is in a different side, obviously online you can really connect different people together. And also, Ella had never been part of a music service activity before, and maybe she wouldn't have signed up if it was in person because of anxiety and worry about, you know, who would be there or what the tutor would be like. But kind of having that gradual beginning into the lessons, and knowing that she can, even though you can not attend in a if it's face to face, we can like email, we can talk about it. So sometimes she would actually say that she was struggling with her mental health, and we would have an open dialogue about that. And I think, yeah, it was really important for me not to kind of show that I was upset that she wasn't attending the lesson, but just showing compassion and understanding that, you know, during lockdown, you don't know how you're going to feel day to day, and just saying, yeah, I'd love to see you next week if you feel up for it. And then also, you know, challenging that through into the lessons, into the lyrics and the music. And then another challenge we had was connectivity issues. So for a few weeks, probably kind of after 4 sessions back in November, her mum couldn't log on to Teams, so she wasn't able to join, and then sometimes she would be 20 to 30 minutes late, and that was a real barrier. So we had a break of her not attending for a while we were trying to sort it out, and then her mum bought a new laptop. But obviously some people might not be able to buy new devices, so that could be a barrier that would be difficult to overcome if that family couldn't afford a device. And yeah, how can the music service help to kind of overcome that, or is there another way around it? So in terms of outcomes, things I've noticed is that she's become a lot more confident in singing and songwriting, and she's been more open, sharing different ideas. She's now playing the ukulele again, and being able to play new chords much more confidently and more fluently. So I think she has been practicing a little bit on her own. But yeah, in the first lesson, it was kind of, well, the first few lessons she could play it, but she couldn't really play and sing well enough to feel like it was, you know, benefiting her in that lesson. Like, it would be something that she would want to go and practice on her own. So now, yeah, I've noticed that development with that. She's more prepared now for studying songwriting at university, and she has more confidence and knowing of her ability, because now she's written a few songs with me, a songwriter and music tutor. So it's like, you know, she's got like almost like a portfolio of a repertoire of material that's literally like kind of physical proof that she can do it. And being able to change instruments, I've noticed, is a really great thing for online lessons. And it kind of keeps things a bit more exciting, and, you know, not every lesson is the same. Maybe I've been watching too much Netflix. And yeah, just being able to channel emotions in a healthy way weekly, and yeah, just kind of being able to have that time for yourself, but for your own musical goals, as well as something kind of emotional too. And then, so in terms of what's next, we are in the process of setting up more one-to-one songwriting lessons. So similar to how instrumental lessons are set up, where a student, well, their parent kind of signs up for them. And yeah, these will have flexibility of being online or face-to-face, kind of depending on the student and the teacher and how that's working for them. Also, it could be blended learning too. And this has been will enable us to give more delivery to more young people who are interested in songwriting, maybe some also who haven't done it before or who have been too afraid to go to our songwriter clubs that we have at a couple of different music centres in Hertfordshire. And it's just kind of, yeah, it'd be a nice either introduction for someone who hasn't songwritten before, or for someone who is more advanced or more experienced in songwriting and wants to really develop their skill and have a bit more time one-to-one so that they can kind of take it to the next level. And then, oh, there was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, maybe. Oh, yes. Sorry. Also, I remember that we had, so some of our songwriting clubs, when they went online, because they've always been face-to-face, so during the pandemic, yeah, went online, we noticed some kind of declining of engagement and attendance. And when one student would attend, just kind of coincidentally, it would just be one student who turned up, the tutor noticed it was a much more effective session and that young person really came out of their shell more. So yeah, this kind of shows the positivity and benefits of one-to-one online sessions as well. And that's also partly why we wanted to look at this more rather than just focusing on Songwriter Club that already exists. So thank you for listening, and yeah, be part of the Q&A now.
Thank you so much, EJ. That was really inspiring and fascinating. It was really good to hear your journey as well, from participant to leader, and how that's informed your work. And having these case studies is so important for us to think about practice coming to life. So thank you so much for being so honest and sharing that with us.
Thank you.
So we have had some questions come through. So this first one's for you, EJ, actually. This is from David Way. He's asking, after saying thank you so much, he is asking, was it difficult to get Ella to open up with her feelings at the beginning? And if so, what were your strategies?
So it definitely wasn't as difficult as it's been with some young people. But I think, yeah, one of the strategies was kind of looking at a film or talking about something kind of separate, but that you can still relate to. Or sometimes even like I would share something, obviously not too personal, but just something like, oh, yesterday, I don't know, just like a random story, or this happened, or my friend said this, or sharing a song that I've written, I think is a really, really good way, because it's like, if you share something even with a friend, then they might feel more inclined to share something as well. So it's like you share your art and then they want to share it back. And then another thing is listening to different songs. So you could listen to a song that they really like and then talk about the meaning within that. And then maybe they would relate to some of it or want to talk more about that topic or another topic, or yeah.
Thinking about that in a bit more detail, and this is Nick and Sophie, if you've got anything to add here, do you feel like that openness is easier to get in an online setting, given that people are in a more familiar surrounding, which might be their lounge or their bedroom or their kitchen? Do you feel that has an effect on how they are able to open up with you?
I would say that from my perspective, I don't think I would know what the answer to that was, because I don't do frontline stuff. I don't recall there being anything in Nell's study about that. But if Nell is in the audience, she will type something into the chat about it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's hard to know because I haven't asked the question, but I feel like, because I feel like, yeah, there is maybe that, and because we've actually never met each other as well. So you might think that that would actually, you know, be a barrier because you wouldn't want to share with someone you haven't met. But yeah, I think there is just that comfortability, and you can turn your camera off or you can mute when you want. It's kind of maybe a bit less pressure almost.
I think that one of the things that we did talk to our associates about when we were doing sessions with Nigel Taylor last summer was what it was going to be like starting new relationships with new pupils that began in the digital domain, whereas up to that point the majority of relationships had been migrated from the school classroom or the school rehearsal room, if you like, into online. I think we've still got more to learn about how that's been for some people. But that was also where I think there was considerable drop-off in take up and start up for new pupils this academic year.
So going forward, EJ, do you imagine that it's going to be a blended approach for you with Ella, or is it going to stay purely online?
I imagine it will stay online for now. Also, because she's going to university, I think, depending on her age as well, and who we provide for, I guess the delivery will have to come to an end at some point, because yeah, of her age. But yeah, if not, I think it could definitely carry on online.
Okay, we've got a question from Andrew Lane here from Medway Music Hub. Do the panellists feel that the results of the findings from children would be different now? For example, the positive response to having online lessons on an ongoing basis, considering the widely reported Zoom fatigue as the year has gone on?
I think certainly in Wiltshire, some of the results would almost certainly be different, as would the ones from tutors. But I do think that, I mean, as Sophie said, it happened really quite early on, this initial piece of research. But I think that moving forwards, we need to differentiate between Zoom fatigue because they've been having all of their schooling all day for 5 days a week as well, and Zoom or other platforms' place in a longer term, more embedded music education offer. I think that probably is the distinction that we should mainly be concerned with. I don't know what you thought, Sophie.
Yeah, I agree. I think a blended approach where there is a mixture is probably what will emerge and what children will find less stressful. And as Nick says, that the Zoom fatigue has been so much focused on their schooling, particularly secondary age pupils being on Zoom for hours every day, that they then don't want a music lesson after school. And once they're back in school face to face, having a Zoom music lesson might actually seem quite appealing. So yeah, I think it's a really good question to raise, because our research is a year old now and things have changed dramatically since then, and we're still learning as we go.
Thank you, Sophie. We've got another question for EJ here now. This is from Neve, who says, again, thanks for sharing such an interesting experience. And as a fellow music tutor, having moved to online delivery, I really resonate with everything you've shared. Have you had chance to change how you prepare for lessons, both with materials and mentally as a teacher? And Neve teaches at Leeds Junior Conservatoire.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Yeah, I guess I haven't thought about that. It's felt very, I guess, natural. I think in terms of how I prepare for lessons, I don't think I've changed too much in how I prepare. I guess I just make sure that I have my instruments on hand. But already with these kind of lessons, I have a rough idea of what we might do and how it follows on from the last session, but it's also kind of quite flexible and led by the student, so I don't have to prepare too much. But I guess just making sure that I'm like engaging online, because sometimes when as you said, you've been talking on Zoom all day, you start to feel a bit more distracted and bored. So I'll just make sure that I'm like very, very present, and can use different things online. So for example, you know, the YouTube videos or listening to songs, making it quite interactive and quite kind of fast paced, like getting stuff really done.
Yeah, I think a learning curve for a lot of people, myself included, was transferring things to Zoom. The pace is different. It does feel different to in person, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think that, you know, the music teaching, the frontline music teaching community has been extraordinary in adapting to that. I think it's been inspiring and you know, really impressive to see all of that. One of the things that I'm interested in exploring now, like when I was talking earlier about, you know, how we kind of mature some of these things, and I don't mean that because they're immature and crap at the moment, I just mean how we kind of take them forward, is really whether or not there are opportunities for peripatetic tutors or visiting tutors, music leaders, to change the rhythm of their own working patterns a little bit, perhaps be seeing pupils, you know, twice a month and working with them online twice a month. You know, what can that do to do things about pupils owning them or their work a bit more? What can it do about travel times and stress and green related issues and things like that? Can it actually be used to enrich and deepen the offer of what's available, rather than it kind of being an elastoplast to get through a bad time? And I think that's the next kind of exciting bit to come.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next question is for you, Wiltshire. So this is from Jonathan Savage, who is from You Can Play, who's our tech partner on Connect Resound. So Jonathan says he'd be interested to know if your digital strategy helped you reach any schools within Wiltshire that you identified as hard to reach using traditional methods. Have you been able to account for your work within these schools to the Arts Council in a more positive way as a result of the digital work?
It's a really good question again. We have definitely developed relationships with schools for the first time through digital. We've got schools who will attend a cluster meeting if it's on Zoom, but have never attended one in the past when they've been face to face. So that's, you know, a really fantastic development, and it does mean we've got new schools coming on board. On the flip side, we have got schools who were previously very, very well engaged, but don't want to take anything digital. So, you know, I can think of one school in particular that shall remain unnamed, who engages in everything we do, but over the last year they have turned down everything digital that we've offered them. So there's a sort of flip side to it as well. So we're getting new schools on board, but we're potentially losing a couple as well where they're not quite ready to embrace digital. Nick, what did you want to add something to that?
Well, I'd agree with that, and you know, I think what we often try to do, the way that our strategy generally works across all the hub roles, really, is that, you know, if we get a relationship with the school, we'll burrow sideways and upwards as and when we can. But I think, you know, I think if I'd been asked, if Jonathan had asked me 15 months ago whether or not we had a digital strategy, I'd have said, you know, it's kind of all right. We know what we're going to do. Looking back on it now, you know, it was all pretty flimsy, and it's been brilliant. You know, one of the great things has been that it's kind of moved it on, and our strategy, although it's not written down yet, will be fuller and more wholesome, I think, as a result of this pandemic. It's you know, we'd struggled to get people to engage with an experiment with the concepts of digital stuff. Sophie knows that I would frequently bash my head against a brick wall in frustration that people weren't doing it. And then of course everybody got into it at about, you know, 50 seconds notice. So now we can move forward. I rather suspect that one of the issues is keeping it moving forward and not letting it sort of slip back into that old kind of normal, which is why I said earlier what I did. In terms of kind of reporting to the Arts Council, I think that's still to come, but I would say, and I've been in a number of conversations about this, I think it's really important that this time around, when hubs are reporting back to Arts Council and doing their annual data and their narratives, that they really big up the things that they have done in terms of innovation, the new things that they have tried, partly because they've been forced to and partly because they feel they've been allowed to by the relaxation of the hub roles. I think it's really important that those things are bigged up. It's important that DFE in particular understands how broad and diverse and far-reaching music education can be in this country in the 21st century, because we need the next iteration of the national plan to be more broad and more diverse and frankly more 21st century than it was in its first iteration, which was really quite dampened down from what it could have been. And I think that's really important. And I would certainly say, you know, if you're leading Music Education Hub and you're doing some stuff on that report, I think it is worth really making the effort to tell them more than what they just think, what they think that they need to know. Tell them what you think that they need to know and how it's changed things and how that can be better moving forward. Because again, we've got one of these windows of opportunity to push that agenda forward.
Absolutely. Out of interest, the schools that didn't want to engage, did they give you any feedback as to why?
Sorry, I lost the sound for a second then. Can you just repeat that?
You mentioned some schools weren't interested in engaging digitally. Did they give you any feedback as to why? Yeah,
I think that they are yet to be convinced that the quality of digital delivery can be as good as face-to-face. So I think we've got work to do as a Music Education Hub to take them on that journey and to show them that there are differences and that there might be slightly different outcomes when you're working in a digital context, but that the quality can still be really, really high. And there are some schools who are just willing to go with that and try it, and there are others who want to wait and see the evidence first. And that I don't want that to sound negative in terms of schools, because actually Nick said earlier what an incredible journey a lot of music tutors have been on in terms of their online delivery over the last year, but so have schools. You know, I can remember Nick and I doing a Zoom presentation into a school about 2.5 years ago, where 2 teachers hid under a desk because they didn't want to be seen, but they didn't know how to turn the camera off. And that, you know, they were terrified, really, really terrified. And now we've got teachers joining into networking sessions where the entire staff team is sitting in a room with a big camera and a screen, and they're all happily engaging and interacting. So, you know, I don't think we should underestimate the huge journey that schools have had to go on in the last year as well. And we need to help them with that if they're struggling with it.
I think this is really, I mean, I think also I dealt with 1 or 2 conversations with schools for whom certainly in the first lockdown, the issues about dealing with online safety from a safeguarding and child protection perspective were one step too far for them at that particular moment in time. And I know that a couple of them were able to get around to addressing that later, but I think not all schools were able to progress their arrangements with, if you like, external contractors and agencies as quickly as others. And so music inevitably was one of the things that got pushed down the list in these senses. I think another important thing just about some of these points about, you know, that we said earlier about, you know, we are a sprawling rural county, and that's one of the things that we can't change. And actually our networking and CPD events are always better when there are more people engaging with them and a greater mix and diversity of people and experiences in the room. So I think that online is better, very possibly for a lot of these, for precisely that reason. You know, Wiltshire's the kind of county a lot in similar ways as it will be in North Yorkshire, that, you know, people can spend over an hour travelling to get to something that lasts an hour long, and then, oh, it's twilight, that means they might not get home till sort of nearly 7 o'clock at night. This all changes that, and I think we're all learning how to use it better. And I think I would probably rather see more people around the table chipping in and having that interaction than I would less people being in a room with bad coffee face to face for an hour. But not everyone would agree with me about that.
Fair enough. I'm sure if you came to North Yorkshire, we could get some good coffee for you.
I thought it was tea you had in North Yorkshire, but
well, I'm
anyway,
Yorkshire tea, obviously. EJ, we've got a couple of questions coming through for you. So this first one is from Alan Cameron. He says some great songwriting tips, great song examples, and note Ella is going to university to study songwriting. Has she or you considered using an online collaborative songwriting tool or a cloud-based music studio?
We haven't yet, actually. Yeah, it's not something that has come up, but I would be open to it. And yeah, I think maybe she would too. But yeah, we've always just focused on instruments.
And another question for you, EJ, which is about your music services online support. Could you talk about their support and the critical reflection sessions for tutors during lockdown? How these could help tutors work inclusively when you go back to face-to-face as well as online. That's from Michael Davidson.
Yeah, so yeah, we have critical reflection sessions, which is where tutors come together and reflect on our practice, and we ask each other questions, and it's kind of like a support group for music tutors. We talk about any challenges that we've had and how we might overcome them, or how we did overcome them but had difficulties with that. And we had them to start off, well, we had them before lockdown happened, but moved it obviously online, and it was, yeah, really a really good thing to have during the first kind of peak of the pandemic when no one knew what was going on. Yeah, we had them quite regularly, I think every week or every other week, with the same music tutors, and yeah, also when we made videos to send to the different primary schools that the tutors were working in, and we talked about the different kind of activities we could do and shared them, or like yeah, different, I don't know, rhythm games, or like using paper to make different shapes and instruments, or rain shakers, things like that. And I guess in terms of, so could you talk about how these could help tutors work inclusively when back face to face as well as online? I guess the fact that they are continuing, and it's kind of, when we have those sessions, it reinforces the importance of equality, diversity and inclusion, and it's like very much a part of, a very key part of all of our aims for the sessions and delivery, and they're part of our outcomes that we have to meet as well. So yeah, I guess it's kind of that consistency, and knowing that all the tutors around you, the ones you're talking to, feel like it's that important as well. And yeah, I think it will continue, both face to face and online.
Brilliant, thank you. We are almost at 2 o'clock, so I would say if anyone's got a burning question, to very quickly type it in. Someone's just made the comment that peer support networks have been really vital, and it can be really lonely out there, which I'd agree. And it was really great to hear from Wiltshire that you've been doing mental health sessions. Do you want to perhaps say a little bit about that?
Well, yes. Well, not bizarrely, but 2 or 3 years ago, we provided a development grant to the leader of one of our associate organisations who wanted to improve her understanding of mental health issues. And she subsequently did the training, left the organisation and became a mental health first aid awareness trainer. And so that was quite a good connection and stuff. But essentially, we provided that to, we did some of the sessions actually in partnership with Bath and North East Somerset Hub. But I think we've had about 20 of our associates and team members pass through that course, people who I think have used it to develop their understanding in terms of working with others, but also I think in many cases to help them with some of the things that they themselves were facing. And I think that's been really important. I'm glad that we were able to sort of adapt and kind of move into that arena. And I suspect that we will carry on providing that kind of stuff for some time.
Excellent. Well, that was really neatly finished bang on the dot, 2 o'clock there, Nick. Thank you. So once again, just a huge thanks to Sophie, Nick and EJ for presenting and sharing your experiences with us.